Hi everyone, welcome to DFTW, a channel to see the world from a different angle. Please subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to receive our daily uploads. Today, we touch on a phenomenon rarely seen in recent decades. When Washington pushes allies away, Beijing steps in, how China is recasting itself as a reliable partner. Within merely 4 weeks of early 2026, an unmistakable diplomatic pattern has emerged. As President Donald Trump's second-term politics strain relations with long-standing U.S. allies, Beijing is moving quickly and deliberately to present itself as a stable, predictable, and pragmatic partner. A steady procession of Western leaders through the gates of the Forbidden City is no coincidence. It is the visible result of shifting calculations in capitals that, until recently, treated close alignment with Washington as the default setting of foreign policy. The visit of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer to Beijing on January 28, 2026, has become the clearest symbol yet of this shift. Starmer is not alone. Since the start of the year, Chinese President Xi Jinping has hosted leaders from South Korea, Canada, Finland, Ireland, and now the United Kingdom, with Germany's new chancellor expected to follow, and French President Macron already visiting Beijing in late 2025. 7 of these countries are formal U.S. treaty allies. All of them have, in different ways, felt the sting of Trump's tariffs, threats, and transactional approach to diplomacy. Another European nation in the spotlight because of Greenland is also connecting itself to China. Although its head of government has not expressed an intent to visit Beijing in 2026, the Danish government has indeed sent high-level officials to China, including a substantial business delegation led by Minister Bodskov in the late January 2026. Taken together, these visits underline a simple but consequential reality: China is positioning itself as the adult in the room at a moment when Washington appears increasingly volatile like a naughty school bully. Trump's alienation strategy is now drowning in its consequences. Donald Trump's return to the White House has brought back the defining features of his first term, but with sharper edges. Reciprocal tariffs, additional duties on steel, aluminum, cars, and auto parts, alongside open threats against allies, have become routine tools of U.S. policy. NATO partners have been warned, pressured, and publicly criticized. In one of the most startling episodes this month, Trump openly floated the idea of annexing Greenland and threatened punitive tariffs against European countries he accused of blocking U.S. interests. Although he later backed down, the damage was done. For many allied governments, the episode reinforced a growing sense that U.S. commitments are conditional, transactional, and subject to abrupt reversal. Trade, security, and even territorial questions appear negotiable under pressure. This environment has forced allies to hedge. Diversifying trade, reopening diplomatic channels, and reducing overdependence on Washington are no longer theoretical discussions, they are becoming policy. Beijing's counterpitch: stability over shock. China's response has been carefully calibrated. Rather than triumphalism, Beijing has leaned into the language of stability, multilateralism, and predictability. At the World Economic Forum in Davos earlier this month, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng drew a sharp contrast with Washington's posture. While Trump touted tariffs and unilateral leverage as proof that the U.S. had become the hottest country in the world, He Lifeng defended globalization, free trade, and dialogue. His message was clear: China may not be perfect, but it is consistent. It supports the United Nations system, the World Trade Organization, and negotiated solutions over coercive pressure. For countries unnerved by Washington's unpredictability, this message has resonance. China also showed its contempt for Trump's Board of Peace with silence, like most influential countries in the world. Importantly, Beijing has not limited its pitch to rhetoric. The diplomatic calendar itself has become part of the sales strategy. Hosting a succession of Western leaders sends a signal that China is open for business, open for dialogue, and willing to engage even with governments that remain formally aligned with the United States. China is also opening its doors unilaterally to citizens of over 50 countries, so that they can feel the welcoming and accommodating China with their own eyes and hands, instead of being fooled by their ears. The most alarming part is that the UK is resetting its foreign policy with China, from estrangement to engagement. Keir Starmer's Beijing visit illustrates how this recalibration is playing out in practice. UK-China relations have been strained for years, weighed down by disputes over Hong Kong, technology, and security concerns. Yet economic reality has a way of reasserting itself. Britain is grappling with slow growth, fragile supply chains, and uncertainty in its transatlantic relationship. Starmer's three-day trip is explicitly framed as a reset. Trade and investment are front and center, as is a broader effort to stabilize political ties. The UK's recent approval of a massive new Chinese embassy in London, controversial but symbolically powerful, has already signaled a softer approach. For Beijing, the UK matters not just as an economy but as a bellwether. If London can justify renewed engagement with China despite US pressure, others can follow. The UK is Washington's key ally and has been a close follower since World War II. Still, it is approaching Beijing and alienating itself from the US. Canada, America's closest ally and neighbor, which shares the longest border on Earth, is also moving toward Beijing. Its pivot to China has been even more striking. Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing, the first by a Canadian leader since 2017, produced concrete results: eased Chinese tariffs on Canadian agricultural exports, and a reciprocal easing of Canadian tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. According to the Canadian Prime Minister, his country's passport holders will soon be able to visit China visa-free. Trump's reaction was immediate and hostile. He threatened 100% tariffs on Canada, accusing it of becoming a drop-off port for Chinese goods into the US. The message to Ottawa was unmistakable: economic sovereignty comes at a cost. Yet Carney appears undeterred. Speaking in Davos, he described a rupture in the world order, and later told Canada's Parliament that almost nothing in the United States was normal now. His argument that Canada must diversify its trade relationships beyond the US reflects a growing consensus in middle powers: over-reliance on Washington has become a strategic vulnerability. For China, which had years of frosty relations with Canada following the Meng Wanzhou affair, the recent thaw suggests that it is willing to move past previous disputes when mutual economic interests align. Across Europe, the shift is more subtle but no less real. Finland, Ireland, Germany, France, Denmark, and even the UK all face similar pressures: US tariffs on key exports, security uncertainty, and domestic economic headwinds. Beijing's outreach offers an alternative, or at least a counterbalance. That does not mean Europe is choosing China over the US. Most European leaders are explicit that they want good relations with both. But the old assumption that Washington's leadership is automatic and benign has been shaken. As one analyst put it, simply reiterating support for global rules and multilateral institutions has been enough for China to improve its standing when the US appears to be undermining them. China's core advantage at this moment is not ideological appeal but reliability. For governments trying to plan 5, 10, or 20 years, predictability matters. Beijing's policies may be tough, sometimes uncompromising, but they are rarely impulsive. Contracts are honored. Dialogue channels remain open. Retaliation, when it comes, follows a discernible logic. By contrast, Trump's approach is openly personal and transactional. Deals are praised one day and condemned the next. Allies are treated as leverage points rather than partners. In such an environment, even countries deeply embedded in the US alliance system begin to look elsewhere for economic and diplomatic ballast. None of these, however, means China faces no skepticism. Its massive $1.2 trillion trade surplus has alarmed European leaders, who are now worried about Beijing's export dumping and industrial overcapacity. French President Emmanuel Macron's warning in Davos that Europe wants Chinese investment, but not its distortive practices, captures a widespread concern. Beijing has responded by insisting that it does not seek permanent trade surpluses, and that it wants to be not just the world's factory, but also the biggest market on the planet. Whether this reassurance translates into policy changes remains to be seen. Moreover, many countries remain wary of becoming too dependent on China, just as they once worried about dependence on the US. The prevailing strategy is hedging, not replacement. Even US analysts acknowledge the void Trump has created. When Washington becomes more transactional, a vacuum appears. China may not fully replace the US as a so-called security guarantor, ideological leader, or democracy defender, but it does not need to. Filling the economic and diplomatic space is enough to increase its influence. For now, Beijing is benefiting from comparison. Against tariffs, threats, and unpredictability, it offers dialogue, market access, and a steady hand. That contrast is driving allies of the United States, countries that once would have avoided Beijing out of deference to Washington, to knock on China's door. Still, the shift is a changing alignment, not a clean break. The emerging picture is not a dramatic realignment, but a gradual rebalancing. Traditional US allies are not abandoning Washington, but they are no longer willing to let one relationship define all others. China has long been the leader of the global South, and today it is showing itself as a reliable partner in reshaping diplomatic behavior across the global North. Ironically, it is Trump's own policies that have made this possible. By alienating allies and turning trade into a weapon, Washington has weakened its claim to leadership. Beijing, by emphasizing stability over shock and engagement over exclusion, is stepping into the gap, quietly, patiently, and with growing success. As the US is quickly declining and no longer positioning itself as a world leader, China is extending its hand to the world as a friend and partner, not with coercion but with assurance.